11,000 years ago, in what is now southeastern Turkey, someone built something impossible. Massive limestone pillars, some weighing 10 tons, arranged in precise ceremonial circles. Carved with animals rendered in such detail, you can see the musculature, count the ribs, the scale of a cathedral, the ambition of a civilization. This was 9,600 years before the Common Era, 6,000 years before the pyramids, 5,000 years before Stonehenge. At a time when, by every model we had, humanity was still scattered in small bands of hunter-gatherers, too busy surviving to build anything at all. No farming, no metal tools, no writing, no cities, no civilization, by any measure we use. And yet, here it was. Scientists couldn't simply test a labeled Göbekli Tepe builder. No ancient DNA from the site's specific occupants has been published. But ancient DNA from nearby and related early farming populations gave us something almost as powerful, a genetic map of the human world that surrounded and produced this site. And what it reveals demolishes every fringe theory you've heard and replaces it with something far more extraordinary. To understand how, we first need to understand just how impossible this place really is. The site sits on a limestone ridge in the Taş Tepeler region of southeastern Turkey, isolated, elevated, deliberately positioned above the surrounding plains. When German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt first arrived here in 1994, he recognized immediately that something was different. Not a habitation site, not a burial ground. Something that had no existing category in the archaeological record. What Schmidt's team eventually excavated, and what geomagnetic surveys have since confirmed, was a complex of more than 20 enclosed structures, each containing multiple T-shaped pillars arranged in careful rings. The largest pillars stand 6 meters tall. They were quarried from limestone bedrock nearby, shaped without metal tools, transported uphill, and erected with engineering precision that still defies easy explanation. There were no wheeled carts, no metal chisels, no draft animals, only human coordination, accumulated expertise, and a shared sense of purpose, powerful enough to sustain construction on this ridge for more than a millennium. The carvings are what stop you cold. Foxes, vultures, scorpions, serpents, rendered in high relief, lifelike, intentional, not random decoration. Evidence of a symbolic vocabulary so sophisticated it implies a cultural tradition far older than the pillars themselves. And then there's the detail that changes everything about how we understand this site. The oldest layers are the most impressive. The earliest pillars, those from the very first phase of construction, are the tallest, the most elaborately carved, the most precisely arranged. As you move forward in time through the archaeological sequence, the construction simplifies. Pillars get smaller, the spatial organization loosens, the craftsmanship retreats. In every civilizational tradition we know, skill accumulates. Complexity increases over time. Here, it reverses. Who were these people? And why would their greatest achievements belong to the very beginning? The moment archaeologists published the first images of Göbekli Tepe, the theories arrived. The Anunnaki, ancient Sumerian deities that some researchers reinterpret as extraterrestrials who appeared to early humanity and transmitted civilization. Göbekli Tepe fit their proposed timeline almost too neatly. The Watchers, described in the Book of Enoch as fallen angels who shared forbidden knowledge with humans. The intricate carvings in this reading are records of that transmission. Graham Hancock's Lost Civilization thesis, a sophisticated pre-Ice Age culture wiped out by catastrophic flooding at the end of the last glacial period, passed its knowledge to surviving hunter-gatherers as the world rebuilt. Göbekli Tepe, in this framework, is that civilization's final message, the Garden of Eden hypothesis. The astronomical alignment theories, the ancient global civilization arguments. Every one of these theories shares the same underlying premise. Ordinary pre-agricultural humans couldn't have done this. Something external, some outside knowledge, some outside hand, must have been involved. That premise is exactly what ancient DNA dismantled. Not by attacking each theory directly, not by arguing on their own terms, but by mapping the actual genetic world that surrounded and produced this site in enough detail that any significant outside population would have left a detectable signature. And no such signature has been found. Every single one of these theories made the same mistake. They looked at what these people built and concluded it exceeded human capacity. DNA didn't just prove them wrong. It found something that makes every one of them look small. But to understand what the DNA revealed, we need to understand what archaeologists found on the ground first. If the kind of content we just covered, ancient DNA, vanished builders, the real science behind the myths, belongs on your feed, subscribe now so you never miss what we put out next. Archaeologists working at Göbekli Tepe and across the broader Taş Tepeler region didn't just find pillars. They found tens of thousands of animal bones, gazelle, aurochs, red deer, processed in quantities suggesting organized communal feasting at a scale that required substantial logistical coordination. Not a passing camp. Not a seasonal gathering. Something sustained, repeated, deliberately organized. They found sickle blades and grinding stones. Evidence suggests these populations were already transitioning toward agriculture. Not fully settled farmers yet, but no longer purely mobile hunter-gatherers either. The excavation reports from the German Archaeological Institute describe a population navigating a remarkable threshold in human history. They found permanent roofed enclosures, multiple phases of deliberate construction. This was not a pilgrimage site visited once a generation. It was a place maintained, modified, and expanded across more than a millennium. And then the detail that reframes everything else. The oldest enclosures, the earliest phase of construction, show the most sophisticated work, the tallest pillars, the most intricate carvings, the most precise spatial arrangement. As the sequence moves forward in time, complexity decreases. The tradition continues, but the ambition retreats. This is the opposite of every known pattern in technological development. If an advanced civilization had been directing this work, transmitting its knowledge downward, you would expect quality to hold or improve. What you find instead is a tradition that reaches its highest expression at its very origin, then gradually simplifies as the generations who built the first enclosures pass away. Archaeology was telling an extraordinary story. Ancient DNA from the broader human world surrounding this site was about to make it personal. The science here begins with a constraint. Ancient DNA extraction works best from specific skeletal elements, the dense petrous portion of the skull, the inner ear bone structure, where genetic material survives the longest. From sites close to Göbekli Tepe and from populations across the broader Neolithic Near East, researchers have recovered and analyzed hundreds of ancient genomes. What they assembled is a genetic map detailed enough to answer questions that archaeology alone couldn't touch. The first major finding, the ancient Near East was not a single undifferentiated population. Ancient DNA revealed genetically distinct groups living in close geographic proximity. Anatolian farmers, Levantine farmers, populations from the Zagros Mountains, each carrying a different ancestral signature. The region's genetic landscape was mapped in unprecedented resolution. The Anatolian early farmers, the population whose world produced Göbekli Tepe, carried a specific ancestral profile unlike their Levantine or Zagros neighbors, a distinct lineage, traceable, identifiable, and deeply local. Now apply that to every fringe theory at once. If a separate advanced civilization had entered this region, one whose knowledge produced Göbekli Tepe, their population would have left a genetic trace. That's how populations work. People mix. Founders leave signatures in their descendants. Outsiders create detectable patterns in the genetic record. So far, ancient DNA from the wider Neolithic Near East has not revealed the kind of anomalous outside population a lost civilization hypothesis would require. No hidden founders, no mysterious ancestry signal arriving from nowhere, no ghost population embedded in the data. The genetic picture of the human world that produced Göbekli Tepe is fully local, deeply rooted, continuous across thousands of years before the first pillar was raised. There was no outside hand. There never needed to be. These were fully modern humans, the same cognitive capacity, the same drive to create, the same ability to organize around a shared purpose. But the DNA picture didn't just tell us what kind of people produced Göbekli Tepe. It told us where those people went. And that answer changes the story entirely. This is where the story stops being about an ancient site and starts being about you. The Anatolian early farmers didn't remain on their limestone ridge. As the centuries passed, as knowledge of cultivation spread westward through Anatolia and into Europe, these populations moved with it. Not in a single coordinated wave. A slow generational expansion, driven by the logic of farming. Find land, cultivate it, build communities, continue. By the time this expansion had run its course, the Anatolian early farmer lineage had become one of the primary ancestral sources for modern Europeans. Modern Europeans carry an estimated 40 to 60% of their genetic heritage from exactly this ancestral population, the same population whose world produced Göbekli Tepe, and they are far from alone. A significant portion of humanity alive today traces ancestry through this same lineage. Pause and consider what that means. The people who organized the labor to quarry and raise 10-ton pillars without metal or wheels, who maintained a sacred tradition on a hilltop in southeastern Turkey for over a millennium, who carved animals into stone with such precision that the craftsmanship still commands attention 11,000 years later. Their genes survived every empire, every migration, every upheaval that followed. In the most literal biological sense, for a significant portion of humanity alive right now, the world that raised those pillars is in your ancestry. They didn't disappear. They became us. Now the final question: why did they build it? The standard model of human development runs like this. Agriculture produces surplus. Surplus produces leisure. Leisure produces complex thought. Complex thought produces religion. Religion eventually produces monumental building. Infrastructure first, meaning later. Göbekli Tepe inverts it. The temple came before the farm. The impulse to gather around something sacred, to return to a place, maintain a tradition, build something that reaches beyond the practical, appears to have existed before agriculture. Some researchers now propose that this organizational drive may itself have helped catalyze the transition, that the social structures sustaining Göbekli Tepe were precisely what made permanent settlement possible. Not surplus generating meaning generating surplus. These were not primitive people. They carried the same brain we carry, the same capacity for abstraction, for long-range planning, for the sustained cooperative vision required to move a 10-ton block without wheels. The distance of 11,000 years collapses when you understand that their biology is your biology. Göbekli Tepe isn't evidence of aliens or hidden gods. It's evidence of us, of what humans have always been capable of when they reach for something larger than themselves. Their proof isn't just in the stone, it's in your blood. What do you think drove them to build Göbekli Tepe? Before farming, before cities, before everything we think of as civilization? Drop your theory in the comments. I read everyone.